This is the theme of Setback and Misery. Annie's lack of talent, select frames. And so she brings in the fire pit, the little barbecue pit, and she's in the pit is his novel, that novel, that untitled novel. So we do know she still had it, and let's look at it now. We do know she still had it. Here's the leather briefcase, and she's going to take out the novel. And here is a screenshot of that. And so, taking the novel out is like going through the door. There's sort of like a process in just taking a novel out. And she's going to pour lighter fluid on it and urge him to burn his own book, right? All that time that he took, those 6 weeks of sitting in a cabin to write that book, and he's now having to burn it. And I think, again, this is both punishment and pain, because the pain comes as a result of being punished for doing something other than what your fan base expects you to do, right? As much as J.K. Rowling has created new books, it has not caught the same type of fire that the Harry Potter series. No one really respects it. And she has sort of like the same attitude as Paul Sheldon. I really wanted to do more serious work, but this idea came to me while I was on a train, and maybe I should pursue it, right? And so we see a parallel in that way. So here's the lighter fluid. And it's interesting. This bothers me so much that Annie can just burn someone else's book. That's why I said she's not the right type of person to judge the writing of Paul. She could read the book and be engaged in the world, but she doesn't have the academic tools to judge the writing. So we don't know for certain if she finished the book, because the last time she got mad, she said she was 40 pages in, versus when she just before she sort of shook his bed, she said, I'm at the last 2 chapters. So we know that there is a difference between how she engaged the untitled book and how she engaged the newer book that was at the general store. She doesn't care for the untitled book. It has no nobility. So what if these are some slum kids? They don't talk like that, according to her, even though she's talking to a person who has personal experience with being a slum kid. She doesn't care. All she cares about is her misery, and that misery makes her happy. So she pours the lighter fluid. Again, this makes me upset, because it's interesting how people can have make a comment about work that they are not even capable of doing. Had she been a writer, she's going to pretend that she's a writer when Buster comes in, lie and say that, oh, I've been writing and trying to write like Paul Sheldon, and I try, but I can't do it like him. Um, it's like your copycats, right? They try to copy what you do, but they don't have the true capacity to do that. And then they run out of steam because they haven't taken the time to learn how to write, or they haven't put their hands to actually writing anything. But this bothers me that she could just completely tell him to burn his book, burn all of that work that she's not even capable, or doesn't even really care to pursue on her own. Right? It's like people who have never had a job try to get somebody else fired, right? Because they have the privilege, or because they have the attitude, they have the power, they have the money to complain to the boss, but they've never had a job themselves. And so they're trying to get you fired. So this whole scene really bothers me, because you got all these people who criticize other people for putting in the work that they should put in, but they are criticized for, and basically looking down on their work. So, but you have to sort of blame Paul Sheldon at the same time, because after all, he did not title his work. He did not give it purpose. He asked some outsider person to tell him what the purpose of his book is supposed to be. So I feel like the film is punishing him, and he's going to feel the pain um, effects of that, because now, you know, he has to make peace with the idea that the work that he put into writing it, writing this book, is no longer there. And so she's pushing for him to light the match, because after all, it is his book. So at least she gives him that prerogative, you know. She doesn't burn the book herself. Honestly, I thought she would. But of course, this is a psychological thing, that you would want someone to burn their own book. And she says that he needs to rid the world of this filth. But remember, he gave her permission to read it. And so calling it filth when she doesn't understand character description, right? That's really at the heart of her issue. She only wants to look at the glowing Misery Chastain and her character descriptions, and sort of live vicariously through her. But she doesn't want to look at the slum kids who are struggling in the slums, and how they need to pull themselves up, and how they need help. She doesn't want to see that. So in some ways, it's a class situation, you know, because both characters are white. One, the slum kids are white, because remember, Paul Sheldon identifies with the slum kids, and he's white. And then Misery Chastain is a Victorian era character who's white. And so this lets you know that sometimes things are not always about race, that it's about class. And so Annie attributes Misery Chastain with nobility, and attributes Paul Sheldon's work as being divine. So then by contrast, the slum kids are not noble, and they are not divine. And that's a simple understanding of it, right? But she's calling that untitled work filth. Filth is a very sort of harsh word to suggest about somebody else's work that you didn't even write. But she's calling it filth. And of course, he's going to be resistant. He talks about how his agent, he's given it to his agent already, and she's made dozens of copies, and it's going to be optioned in New York. And then Annie pushes him and tells him that this is the only copy, and she reminds him of his own history, of his own biography. He's trying to fool Annie, but Annie knows him a lot more than he realizes. That at 24 years old, when you were pushing your first book, you only made one copy, and so because you wanted to be taken seriously. And once that book was able to be received and published, you have always been superstitious. And again, she knows his biographies. That's why I guess you got to be careful what you tell people, even through interviews, because people are reading, they are listening, they want to know about you. She knows his biography better than he knows his own biography. And so here he's saying, well, I'll just keep it for myself. No one has to know about it. But then Annie says, as long as it exists, your mind won't be free. And then she tells him to light the match. And so here she's saying that your mind won't be free. So she's accusing him of having an unfree, tangled up mind in writing that kind of work. So she can't seem to understand that you can still transition your talent. See, Annie must not really have a talent. Annie became a nurse, and she became skilled at being a nurse, and she didn't use it properly, because she ended up killing babies and having to be charged with murder or whatever. but she understands skill. So skill is essentially clocking in and doing your work, and clocking out. Oftentimes, depending upon the level, you may utilize your talent. But talent is something that you engage in, you build, you develop. And for her to so easily get him to burn his book suggests to me that she doesn't have talent, that she never really had dreams or something like that. Because when you have talent, when you have dreams, and you see the same in someone else, you are less likely to try to push them to get rid of their talent or get rid of their dreams, as long as you are not jealous of them, right, or envious of them. But usually when you have talent and dreams, you tend honestly not to be so envious of people, because you like what you do. And so for her to call it filth, and that the world needs to be rid of it, she's assuming that people are going to be so critical of this new work that the world itself needs to be rid of it. But Annie represents the world in her mind. She represents she hasn't taken a survey of the world itself. She's only thinking about the world that is in her mind. And her world is isolation, solitude, living in that house, not having any friends, not engaging. The film doesn't even show her engaging with the general store manager, with the sheriff, with his wife, the deputy. She doesn't engage that word. And when she finally does come out engaged, it's yelling at some car, some driver who almost cuts her off. That's her engagement with the world around her. So the world that she's talking about is the world in her head. And that the Misery series, the context and the world that Paul builds, is really the world that she has grown accustomed to. I don't know if you are familiar with Gilmore Girls, and how the writers and creators and executive producers, they have created Stars Hollow. And it's such a world, you honestly think that what you are looking at is a set. And I'm quite sure that it is a film set, of course, right? But the way that it is filmed, the way that the characters move about in that series, is like Stars Hollow actually exists. It's like you're wondering when you could take a trip out there to go and see it and be a part of the whole town, right? And that the world that Lorelai and her daughter Rory and all of the townspeople inhabit, you honestly are thinking that you're going to meet them when you take a visit. And so that's their world. Well, the same can be said of Annie here, that her world, the world that Paul Sheldon has built within his series of books, is the world that she really actually inhabits for herself. If really, when you think about it, Annie thinks she's Misery Chastain. That's why she is so enamored with her, and enamored with Paul himself, because she believes that she is Misery Chastain. It is here where Paul is still trying to get her to change her mind about burning his book. And again, he's essentially saying, I can just keep it for myself. No one has to know. Well, that kind of challenges his own argument, because remember, he says he wants to do more serious work. So then why is he abandoning his mastery orientation and writing Misery, of course, but abandoning the idea of creating a new mastery orientation while he is under, distress, right? you can understand that he's going to have to act out whatever role is necessary to keep himself alive, right? That's essentially what he's doing. Even if he doesn't have any indication of Annie uh, being someone who's going to kill him, we do remember what she said to him when she realized that he was going to kill off Misery, that if I die, you die, right? So that word has entered the atmosphere, so to speak, right? The word death or the word die. But trying to convince her that he should just keep it for himself and no one has to know, she knows that that is not feasible. He has a long history of writing and publishing books and marketing books and selling books. So trying to use that as a possible solution to his immediate problem is just not going to work. What would have helped, what I believe, what would have helped Annie in maybe changing her mind is if he diverted attention to Misery and talked about the new book and said, I thought you were reading the new book. What do you think about it? Because when she is talking about Misery, her whole face lights up. She engages. She doesn't hear anything other than Misery, and that's what she wants to talk about. It makes her happy. And she's trying to divert his attention from that previous Untitled book back to Misery, trying to get him back on the path that he was originally on. And so Annie is just too psychological distressing for him to see the situation as clearly as possible. I'm not quite sure that he could have said enough to get her to change her mind from having him to burn the book, but anything that gets her to focus on the book, and we see that at the end when she shoots Buster and she's wanting to bring in the gun and the needle to kill him. She put 2 bullets in the gun and she was going to inject him with something and I guess shoot him too. He realizes in that moment that he needs to focus on Misery, right? And she says, okay, well, it'll be a wonderful thing or something like that, right? And then he says, it will be complete once we finish the book, right? And we give Misery a life and she can return. Then we have confirmation, of course, at the end of the movie that strategy could have worked. It could have worked had he said it in his bed, had he had enough psychological insight into Annie and how she thinks. See, he's so preoccupied with the ideal in his head that he doesn't want Misery anymore, that he wants to get rid of the series, and that's why he killed off the main character. So he's so preoccupied that he can't see that Misery makes her happy. It's the thing that makes her happy, and that if he would have focused on that and tailored many of his discussions, even getting Annie to read from the book and then engage her in conversation, and then at the same time, while they are engaging in conversation and reading from the book and talking about it, he's healing. And so by the time she doesn't even realize that he is so healed and that he can get up out of the bed without having to fall out, it's too late. But that's why you can have such a blind spot to what is necessary in that moment. She wants to focus on Misery. You don't want to focus on Misery. And so she's again trying to get him to burn his book, and those faces that he gives as a character are always insightful. And so she pushes the idea of the match and the box of matches, right, to get him to free his mind. And again, she says, as long as this book exists, your mind won't be free. And I think you should like the match. And so this is her. It's just such an interesting frame here, what this all means. Um, you know, she must have known on some level that he would have burned his book, because why would she even offer something like that if he's the writer of his own books, the writer of his own fate? Why would she? So she must have known on some level. But of course, we know why she's pushing the ideal, and she has more of the force behind her to ensure that it actually goes through. And so again, he's still appealing. He's still appealing, right? But he's really misguided in his understanding of Annie. He doesn't see Annie. And when you've been treated the same way, you do what you know. It's the saying that people often say, hurting people hurt people. So the agent didn't see him. So he's not seeing Annie. He's not seeing the Annie that is, this is really violent, honestly. Even if she's not putting a hand to him, it's violent for her to push this idea of burning his book. And so then she puts it on his chest with the match in hand. And I still don't think he sees Annie. And so now she has the power in the situation. She has the lighter fluid. He may have the match, but she has the lighter fluid. And she's going about the bed basically saying, don't you see how much this is important to do, right? That it's God's plan or God's will or something like that. And then she continues to pour the lighter fluid on top of him, on top of the bed, on top of the covers. And then after that, she says, help me, help you, right? Help me, help you. All right, like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more discussions. You can visit my YouTube channel for further film analysis. It's Favorites Film Analysis as the title of the channel. You can always send me an email and ask me a question, reginayfavorites@yahoo.com. My Overcoming Setback, 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction book will become available around October 2021. I'm still doing some editing. The book does not focus on film analyses, but I use the content that I created for the book to support my my perceptions of setback used as a theme in select films. So when the book becomes available, I will send out a notification video, audio. Thank you very much for visiting the channel.